Welcome. Anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Lorne from Flavours Holidays, and I'm delighted today to welcome Mark from Seat 61, who's going to talk all things trains. So Mark, thank you very much for your time. I've got lots of questions. The first one is, could you please tell us, how did Seat 61 come about?
Oh, well, that's quite easy, really. I was commuting to and from London, and the momentous day finally finished my novel. Not novel I was writing, novel I was reading on the train home. And I went into WH Smith's to find something to read and bought a Teach Yourself websites book for £2.95, quite possibly the best £2.95 I've ever spent in my life. And I tried it, and it worked, and I got a web page online. And I thought I would fill the gap between how easy and practical and affordable it is to take the train down to Spain or Italy or Austria or Prague or wherever, and how downright impossible it's been in the commercial world to find anyone who would tell you how to do it. So that's how it started, way back in 2001. I never thought, I mean, it was a hobby, never thought it would become my full-time job, which it did in 2007, and certainly never expected it to receive up to 1 million visitors a month. Not at the moment, of course, but under happier times.
Yeah, and were you always, like as a little boy, did you always love trains?
Yes, well, I love travel. And if you love travel, it's not just about the destination, it's about how you get there. I think a mountaineer would understand. It's not about being at the summit. Hey, let's get a helicopter. It's about the climb as well as the summit. And the summit has more relevance when you've actually made a bit of effort to get there. So it's about travel. And if you love travel, well, modes of travel where you see where you're going and you get to experience the countries you pass through, and where you're treated like a human being. You can stand up and walk around, you can eat in a restaurant, you can sleep in a bed in your own room. That's got to be the way. So that's why I like ship and train travel. I like ships almost as much as trains, actually, as a mode of travel.
I must share with you, I remember years ago I worked as a tour guide, and I used to take a group of Americans Paris to Rome overnight on the train. And I suggested to them, I said, oh, let's make an event of it. Let's get a party, have a picnic, bottles of wine. And these Americans, literally, as soon as we left the Gare du Nord, drank all the wine, ate all the food, and they threw up all over the couchettes, all the way back, all the way to Rome. So whenever I think about train travel, I think, oh, I'm not really very sure. And I suppose that's maybe typical of a lot of people, is like not sort of the couchette experience, but actually thinking about planning travel and traveling by train. We're also used to looking on Skyscanner for flights, but when you're thinking about traveling by train, what are the things you should be thinking about, and where should you, obviously Seat 61 is a good starting point, but what should you be thinking about when you're thinking about travel?
The problem is the rail industry, the international rail industry, isn't as developed as the airline industry. I once had someone who was ex-airline who recently joined the rail industry say we were about 20 years behind, which sort of encouraged me because I thought we were 30 years behind. But it's all about knowing where to go. Once you know which trains you need to book and where to book those particular trains, it's actually not difficult. The key is knowing where to go for which train or which route. And of course, if you're putting together a Eurostar from London to Paris with a TGV from Paris to Milan, it's not always a good idea to book London to Milan in one go. You'll only get the minimum time in Paris. You probably want a bit more, maybe time for lunch. So it's really about planning it rather than expecting the booking systems to just book a journey just by putting in London and Italy.
And I know, obviously, most of our guests today, the questions were about travelling to Italy. So if you're travelling to Bologna or thinking about travel even to Puglia, is there a specific route then? Would you always start off, is it always the Eurostar? Is that the first port to Paris and then you figure it out from Paris? How does it work?
Well, the easiest way is to take Eurostar from London to Paris, 2 hours, 20 minutes, fares from £78 return. Then you take the TGV from Paris to Turin or Milan. That takes just 5 hours, 40 minutes to Turin, which is probably the best interchange point. In fact, I've got let's show you the TGV.
Wow.
In fact, before that, in fact, add a couple of hours in Paris to have lunch at the Tremblay restaurant in Paris. It's probably the most amazing station buffet you will ever eat in. Quite incredible. And of course, it's part of the station. So you can just, after your wine, you can stagger to the waiting TGV, which is just a little while ago, a little way away on the platform, just a stone's throw from your table.
And when you and when you book train tickets, is it like when you book flight tickets? Like if you book them really far in advance, that's when you get the cheapest ones, and if you wait to the day before, it's really expensive.
That's exactly right. If you book in advance, you get the cheap prices. If you want to go tomorrow, then you get the expensive prices, just like air travel. So your London-Paris is, as I say, from £78 return. Paris to Turin or Milan on this TGV behind me starts at €29 each way. Or if you want to push the boat out and go first class, about €45 first class each way. That'll get you to Turin or Milan, and then stay overnight. Have a look around Turin because it's a fantastic city. And the next day, it's only a couple of hours to Florence or 3 or 4 hours to Rome. You can go from Turin to Florence from as little as €19.90 each way. You can go to Rome from €29.90 each way. So it needn't be expensive if you book in advance. It's exactly like air travel in that.
And then presumably, though, I'm sorry to ask, but in terms of the tickets, then you obviously have to go to different websites to book different train tickets. Then there's not one sort of consolidator who would do the whole thing for you.
Well, you've got a choice. You can either go to each operator's website. You can go to Eurostar.com. You can go to SNCF, which is the French Railways website, to book your TGV. You can go to trainitalia.com to book your Italian train. And there's no booking fee if you do that. But of course, it requires getting to grips with 3 different websites. There are 2 sites that are worth knowing about because they've got multiple connectivity. They connect to multiple operators, including the French, the German, the Spanish, the Italian, and even the British. One is thetrainline.com, and the other is raileurope.co.uk. So both of those will book multiple providers. So you can book them all in one place, although both of those have a small booking fee. I recommend breaking the journey down because if you try and book London to Milan or whatever in one go, it'll only give you the minimum interchange points, but it's not difficult to just book London, Paris, add it to your basket, book Paris to Milan with sort of a 2 or 3 hour break in Paris, add that to your basket, and then you just pay once when you check out.
And then is it a bit like with airlines too? So say, for example, I book an EasyJet flight from Edinburgh to London, and then I book Alitalia London to Rome. If my EasyJet flight's late and I miss the connection with Alitalia, then basically I've got to buy a new ticket. So would that be the same with the trains if something happens to the Eurostar?
Not quite, because there is something called Rail Team, where the train companies work together. And French Railways high-speed trains and Eurostar high-speed trains are both members of Rail Team. So is the German railways, and if your Eurostar is late, you will be rebooked on a later TGV to Italy at no extra charge. But there isn't that arrangement between the TGV and Trainitalia. There is something called the Agreement on Journey Continuation, which means they probably will help you out if there's a delay, but you need to be aware of that, so you need to allow a bit of extra time. The timetable might say you can change in 10 minutes. It might only take you 2 minutes to walk from one train to another. I'd allow 45 minutes in Turin, for example, if you were connecting the same day between the TGV from Paris and the onward Trainitalia train. And this is the sort of thing the reason why I started Seat 61, to explain all of this and say, look, book these trains at these websites from these prices, just to try and explain it all to people, because it's actually not difficult once you know. It's finding someone who knows that's the difficult bit.
It's getting the expert, isn't it, and asking the right questions. Somebody was asking, do you think it's safe for a solo traveller travelling by train?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, families travel by train. The trains are used by the locals. They travel around on their own. They travel around as families. They travel around as groups, just like people use planes. And yeah, I must admit, touch wood, in decades of travel, I've never had any problem at all.
And in terms of in today's world, with all our restrictions and all things that are happening, will the experience of train travel be similar now to aircraft in terms of obviously masks? Are there any other things that people should be made aware of in terms of travelling by train now?
Masks, yes, and of course social distancing, just not bunching up with people. But trains aren't cramped like aircraft. There is more space anyway. And with prices like €44, €45 from London to Paris, if you go first class, you get even more space. So it's not like you're crammed in. And of course, you have to remember on aircraft that 35,000 feet, so much of the air is recycled because they can't use the fuel to heat up the sub-zero air from outside. That air is recirculating and recirculating. With trains, much more, even if they're air conditioned, much more fresh air is sucked in.
And I've got a question as well from Linda. Is there somewhere to store luggage in Paris or Turin, for example?
Oh yes, Paris, most of the major stations in Paris have a left luggage office. Turin has a left luggage office at Porta Nuova station, but not Porta Sousa. But the other thing to do is just to go across the road to a local hotel, because very often for a few euros, they'll look after your bags. So there's always ways out, even at the few smaller stations that don't have left luggage facilities.
And in terms of luggage, that was one thing I was wondering about, because that's the thing I love about flying is you just give away all your luggage and it gets checked in and you don't see it again. So I just wondered, in terms of actually kind of when you're doing lots of different transfers and taking suitcases from one platform to the other, do porters still exist?
Not really, but my wife and I take a backpack size roll along. So it's got wheels and they're tough wheels, so curbs aren't a problem. It's not like those awful things on casters which last about 2 trips before they break. So we just pull them behind us. And many stations you'll find either flat and level access between the platform, the concourse and the street, or you'll find there are lifts and escalators, and it's not really a problem. But the secret is not to take suitcases the size of a 20-foot shipping container, which I do see some people manhandling onto trains, and you think, why do they do that? Now, even when we go for a long period of time, my wife and I just take the backpack size thing. So in fact, the other day, she turned up with 14 kilos and I had 15. So that's quite something, isn't it? I actually had more luggage than my wife. And that doesn't happen often.
And I suppose that's the good thing as well about travelling by train, is there's no luggage restriction. You're not going to get your luggage weighed and be charged an extra.
Nobody worries about it. And of course, you've got access to it. So if you finish your reading book and the second one is packed inside your main bag, well, you can still access it.
And so when you take a trip yourself, a train trip, what's some of your train highlights? Where would you be recommending us going?
Well, where do I start? I mean, there are some fabulous routes, and sometimes it's worth slowing down because although there is a nice high-speed line between, say, Cologne and Frankfurt, take an hour longer, take the old route along the Rhine Valley, and you get a scenic cruise down the Rhine by train as part of getting to southern Germany or Switzerland. And of course, if you get to Switzerland, well, there are some fabulous routes through the Alps. You might be tempted to take the fast train from Zurich to Milan. It takes only 3 hours and 26 minutes through the new Gotthard base tunnel, but actually, go the Bernina route, where the train to Kur connects with a little narrow gauge train, taking you way up into the Alps, over 2,000 metres high. It's pretty much higher than Ben Nevis here in the UK, before descending down towards Italy. So sometimes slower is better.
And I know with Flavours guests, food and wine is always quite important. And are there any trains that you think you get a better meal or a better dining experience?
The irony here is that the French, a great culinary nation, are not known for their train food. I actually prefer the food that you get on the Czech and Austrian and German trains, where it's served on proper china with proper cutlery, no airline plastic here. And that's a nice experience. And my absolute favourite, my treat when I go on a German train is Erdinger Weissbier, which is served in a proper glass, of course, and it's a special tall glass. In fact, it always amazes me why this huge tall glass that sort of hovers below my mouth, even when it's sitting on the table in front of me, doesn't fall over on the on the train ride. It's just a smooth ride, you see. That's why it doesn't.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. Does anybody have any questions? I think I've asked all my questions. I just want to go and book a train ticket, quite frankly, now and go off travelling. It gets you back in the mood again, which is lovely. Have I forgotten anything?
Hi, are there different types of tickets to buy?
Yes, I mean, if we take, most train companies have a flexible ticket, which can be changed, which costs a lot, and they have cheap advance purchase tickets, which have limited refunds and limited changes. So the Germans, for example, you'll always see two prices when you look up a German train ticket. Spar price, which means saver fare, which is the cheap one with limited refunds and changes. And the flex price, which as its name suggests, is the more expensive flexible one. I mean, in most cases, when you're booking, it's like booking a flight, you just book the cheapest. But there'll be times when you might want a bit of extra flexibility.
Thank you.
Where would you stay if you went up into Switzerland to get the panini? If from, say, if I'm thinking of going London to Brussels to Cologne to Zurich to Switzerland to just to get to Bologna.
Yeah, well, Zurich is where the mainline trains run to Chur, which is a lovely little town. It can actually be nicer to stay overnight in Chur rather than Zurich, the big city.
Okay.
The little narrow gauge train starts in Chur, runs over the Alps and ends up just over the border in Italy at a place called Tirano. And then there's a regional train costing €12, buy on the day, and it'll take you from Tirano into Milano Centrale, Milan Central Station.
Brilliant. When I've been on a train in Italy before, the steps into the train are really mountainous. And if you've got luggage, it can be a bit of a challenge to somebody who's a bit decrepit. Would you recommend sending luggage ahead?
It's nice if you can afford to do it, but from what I can see, it's almost more expensive to send your luggage DHL or some of these luggage services, which usually use DHL as the actual carrier, than to travel yourself. So it's nice if you've got the money, but it's a very expensive thing to do. I would just pack light. Platform heights vary, so some platforms you just are level with the door. Some platforms, like in Italy, tend to be lower. I would ask someone to help, because I always help people in if they're struggling at the door. And there's always somebody around to ask, and they like helping people.
Do they have similar services like they have in the UK or the airports that you can pre-book assistance at railway stations, bigger railway stations?
You can if you're in a wheelchair, for example, but not quite in the same way that you can for domestic travel here in the UK, just if you need a bit of help. There will be people around to help, but it's not quite as easy as booking UK domestic assistance on one network.
And Pauline was looking at Bologna. Are there any other routes that you suggest for Bologna or?
Well, I mentioned the TGV from Paris to Turin and Milan, but there is another way, of course, and that's this one. Let's just find it on my Zoom backgrounds here.
Gosh, it's amazing what you can do.
Has it changed? Yes, it has. There we go. It's the Tello sleeper train from Paris to Milan and Venice, Milan, Verona and Venice, in fact. Now you can get a couchette in a shared six berth from just €35. So a bed for the night and 500 miles of travel from Paris to Venice for €35. In fact, tell a lie, they actually cut it. It's €29 now. What you can see behind me is a bed in a two-bed sleeper, which starts at about €99 per person. But that's a compartment for two with a wash basin, light breakfast included in the morning. You leave Paris about 7:15 at night from the Gare de Lyon, and you arrive in Venice at 9:30 in the morning after that wonderful rumble across the causeway over the lagoon with this anticipation building before you arrive in Santa Lucia station in the heart of central Venice. And I have to say, of all the stations that I like walking out of and just seeing the view in front of you, you literally walk out the station and there is the Grand Canal with gondolas and vaporettos going up and down. So yes, the Tello sleeper train is a very time-effective way. You can leave London at lunchtime, have an early lunch or eat on the train, a picnic, and be in Venice next morning.
Wow, that's amazing. And great value, actually, looks like.
Sorry?
It's a great value as well.
It is. I mean, obviously, book in advance to get the cheap prices, avoid your busy Fridays. But it can be incredibly good value, especially if it also saves you a hotel night because you arrive in Venice in the morning and leave in the evening.
And if you're a single traveller, though, would you potentially have to share that with a stranger?
Well, you can book a single room all to yourself, and from memory that starts at about €140, so not unaffordable. Or you can share if you're on a budget. And sharing, I go for a 4-berth couchette rather than 6. It's the same size, they just use 4 beds instead of the 6. It means a lot more space per person, both at the daytime part of the journey and the nighttime part of the journey. And that starts at €55 per person.
And so that's Paris to either Venice or Paris to Milan.
Yeah, Paris to Milan, Verona, Venice. The price is pretty much the same wherever you get off, because it's like a hotel. You're staying there for a night.
This is Helen Monroe here. I did that journey about 15 years ago, and I can assure you that coming out of the station in Venice right onto the Grand Canal, I mean, is one of the most magnificent experiences, and it's so much nicer than you know, cluttering through endless airports and things. It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Can I, sorry,
You go.
can I ask about the food on the trains? I mean, presumably there is buffet and drinks and everything that you can get on the trains, all of them.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, the TGV has a cafe bar, as does Eurostar, selling all sorts of snacks, drinks, hot dishes and so forth. The sleeper train has a restaurant car. I mean, it's simple microwave food. It's not a cordon bleu chef cooking in a kitchen or anything, but perfectly good. And I can assure you there's nothing wrong with the wine. I tested that extensively. And the same in Italy. You'll find a cafe bar serving decent coffee, because you won't get instant in Italy, of course. And having a glass of wine or a decent coffee as the train flashes through the scenery, it's one of the pleasures of train travel. And of course, you can bring your own, because there are no rules against that on the rails.
Another fun thing to do, I've gone from Naples to Sicily by train. And that one, you absolutely need to bring your own food, because it's not a posh train, it's just an ordinary train. It goes right down and right onto the boat at Messina. It's wonderful.
I love the train. I haven't done it for a few years now, but the train ferry, where they put the train onto a boat, it happens in so few places now, but it's quite an experience. And again, Rome to Catania or Palermo costs as little as €19.90 if you book in advance on Train Italia.
It's highly possible.
And the Italian trains are very good, because they usually do run on time.
Well, sometimes.
Can I ask another question? It relates to flavours more than anything else, really. Let's assume we get a train to Bologna and we're going on a Flavours holiday. Would Flavours arrange a transfer from the train station to the accommodation?
Yeah, the train station's really near the airport. It's not that far. It's about 15-20 minutes. So yeah, we could probably pass by. But yeah, it's been I think I can see a lot more people going by train now. I think it's going to be more popular.
Yeah, and that applies to all your destinations, you would sort.
Yeah, we can do. I think, just double check. I know Bologna personally, the station very well, so it's easier. If we can certainly have a look at it. We're happy to, if we can accommodate you, we would. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask about senior rail cards? I mean, if you have a rail card here in UK, can you use it for, European travel at all, or is there some other arrangement?
Well, it's a national rail card, so it's only for UK domestic travel. Other countries often have their senior rail cards too, but it's usually not worth buying a senior rail card in every country just to get €10 off one ticket that you're going to be buying. Okay. So the key to it is really to book in advance to get the cheapest prices. Avoid busy Fridays, busy Sunday afternoons, go midweek, book ahead. That way you'll get the cheapest prices, whatever your age.
And did they not used to have a bit like the sort of round Europe rail ticket? Did they not have something for seniors, or?
Well, they have the Interrail Pass, and there are adult, youth, and senior versions of the Interrail Pass. And this will give you unlimited travel for a period of time. You can buy one that's valid for sort of 5 days in 2 months, or 10 days, or 15 days, or 30 days continuously. And this gives you really unrivaled freedom to travel around Europe. But there's 2 things you need to know. One is that you do have to pay reservation fees in certain countries. And in France, Italy, Spain, we're talking €10 for every high-speed train reservation you need to make. And the other thing you need to know is that it's always going to be cheaper to book in advance and buy a normal ticket from €29 from Paris to Milan than to pay €80 a day for rail pass and then pay, in this case, a €30 reservation fee on top of it. So you wouldn't buy this rail pass to save money. To save money, you book ahead and buy the cheap €29 ticket. But if you wanted to go tomorrow when the normal prices are high, or you wanted to stay flexible, you didn't want to commit to where you were going and what time, you really wanted to be free to explore the continent, that's when you'd buy one of these Interrail passes. They've been around since 1973, originally only for young people, but now for people of all ages. And if you do want to really explore and stay flexible, then an Interrail pass is absolutely great.
Yeah. That's been fascinating. I think the big takeaway for me is just how reasonably priced train tickets are. European, I never really realised just quite how reasonably priced they are for getting from such long distances as well. It's brilliant. I think my last question, Mark, is where's your first post-lockdown trip going to be then?
Well, the one trip that I had cancelled as a result of lockdown was a trip on the Caledonian Sleeper from London to Fort William. It's one of my favourite journeys, so I've got sort of withdrawal symptoms for that. But once we get on the continent, I think I'm going to head for the Harz Railway in Germany. It's not far from the in-laws who live in the east of the Netherlands, so maybe I can combine those two trips.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. That sounds great. Listen, thank you so much. That's been brilliant. What I'll do is I'll make a note from the recording and I can send on ladies all the information Mark gave us, all different websites and bits and pieces. It's been really, really useful, and we'll share it out with our other meeties as well. So thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Inspiring us for train travel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you all. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheerio.